Hello and welcome to the Legal and General Just Covered podcast, where we talk to advisors about their views and opinions in the intermediary space. My name's Wayne.
And I'm Hazel, and today we've got Vanessa joining us, who is recently joined the board of the Consumer Duty Alliance, but is also a chartered financial planner who runs her own all-female firm. So we're extremely excited to hear Vanessa's views and opinions. Vanessa, before we started filming, we had a really great chat about happiness and what that means in retirement. And that ties in so nicely some of the research we've done recently. It's called the Happiness in Retirement Campaign. And what we found is about 27% of retirees find their finances quite unpredictable, quite difficult to track. Is that something that you see? And in your role as a financial kind of advisor, planner, how do you deal with that?
I think it's really common, and I think that's why people reach out for financial planning or advice. They may have spent their whole lives building up a really successful business, being a team leader, and forging their way ahead and empowering other people to make a living and have a good quality of life. And they suddenly faced with a cliff edge of what often boils down to is, have I got enough? And so they come to us with a view to, well, how do I navigate the next step? How do I make that plan? And it never ceases to be amazing, because you think some of the things these people have done, where they've built something out of nothing, where they've spotted an opportunity, all of those things. And you think, wow, all the things you've done, and you're asking me, how do I live the rest of my life? I always find that really quite overwhelming. But it's because they've been focused on other things. And that's where our community really helps them, because it strips away the fear and helps them to enjoy their retirement. I really think if you allay people's fears, or even help them identify the gaps or the dangers, you then empower them to get on with the rest of their life and not actually worry about money. There's nothing worse than fretting about money. We all have to do it from time to time, whether it's because you're saving for your first property, or whether interest rates have gone up and you've got to rework your budget, or whether you're looking at retirement. How many holidays can I plan next year? There are little points where you might have to feel a little bit tense about money, but the crushing weight of money worries is something that I feel very passionate about. That's our job to make sure that goes away. Absolutely, because there's a definite link, isn't there, between people's well-being, that emotional and mental well-being, and their financial well-being, isn't there? And I think that link's becoming more and more common to be addressed, and people are becoming more and more aware of it. What are your views on that? And do you see that within your clients? Yeah, I think you do. I mean, I think there are two stages, and I think it's different when you're working and when you're retired. And I think the structure of your life changes. So often when you're working, you're driven by family needs, and maybe particularly these days, often two sides of the family needs, where you might be caring for elderly relatives, and also you might have children or young people that you're helping on their stages of life. And then in retirement, it might well be that you've got concerns about health issues, or you're worried about, I mean, there barely goes past a day when you don't hear about issues about dementia and how that affects people. And I think I've been through that with in-laws and my own parents. So I really do understand it. And in fact, I've had clients help me through that journey, because when I was younger and they had parents in that circumstances, and they would tell stories about what problems they had or how they cope with them, I use them in my own life, and then have hopefully passed some of that on to other clients who've come through and they started to face things, and things that my own family learned that we were able to help. It's a really dynamic flow. You know, financial planning constantly evolves. It's gone, I've been doing this for nearly 40 years. And when I started, it was all about the product. It was all about, well, this product solves this problem. And now it's not about that. It's about life. And it's how you navigate life's finances and how that changes. And so happiness is about feeling a sense of control and a sense of, what direction you're going in. And there may be sometimes areas of vulnerability or areas of uncertainty where you're not quite sure if you're on track. And we can help people sense check that and then identify what they might need to do in order to navigate to the next stage. And then what people do is they live their life with that knowledge in the background, but not at the forefront. I think if all you think about all day long, whether you're working or you're retired, is money, then you're in trouble and you'll never be happy. And I think if you know at the back of your mind that you've got the things to to achieve the ambitions that are really important to you. And they're rarely high net worth things. They're often things about making sure your family are taken care of and making sure your grandchildren have the care they need and all those sorts of things. And that you're able perhaps to take part-time role so that you can help your family. Those are things that are really important to people.
I think that's really interesting that because we drew that out in our research as well, actually, is there hits a point where actually having more income doesn't actually make someone happier. Because as long as they've got enough income to feel stable, as you said, manage that family the way they want to, manage their relationships the way they want to, go on those holidays that they want to. The minute there's anything over and above that, it's lovely to have. But actually, when we measured their fundamental happiness level, it actually, there was a point where it then didn't increase anymore. It was nice for them to have all these extras. But as you said, you're then maybe in the realms of constantly thinking about money, constantly thinking of that next thing, constantly thinking of, well, what can I be achieving next? What are my peers doing, etc. That comparison.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, if you're just constantly thinking out money, no matter how much you've got, it's just not going to be healthy for you. And I've often thought about, before we did that research, is there a point where the actual amount you've got doesn't really come into it, and that has been drawn out, which is absolutely. Yeah,
it can also be the opposite. It becomes a burden. Yeah. You know, if you're in a situation where you have sorted all of those things out, but you've still got this other pot of money, it sometimes becomes a worry, and people think, should I be doing something about it? Or or then it becomes, sometimes people say, I feel really bad. You know, my parents didn't go on holiday. They didn't do the things that we wanted them to do. They wouldn't move to a nicer house or spend money on themselves. And they've left me all this money. And some people feel guilty about that.
The human mind's an interesting thing, isn't it? Where you have that and they're thinking of what was done before, what wasn't done before, and how that influences what they do at that point.
Yeah. And sometimes it's our role to turn that thinking around and say, well, actually, the reason your parents wanted to do that, it was important to them that they left you a legacy. So it's important for their memory that you use that legacy to do good with your own family and secure your family's future and to know about that. And if there's a bit left over, then there's other things in the world that you can do with it. And that you can help support other people. Yeah. And then they start to think about the positivity of that side of it and what they can do with it.
Especially if they had been over in stipulating what they should do.
And sometimes people haven't thought about it. I mean, we have gone through a generational change. A post-war generation had been affected by, obviously worldwide significant events, and it changed the way they spent money. And we've gone through that stage, and we've gone through to it's particularly in our country where people are inheriting wealth, and 70% of wealth in this country will be held by women, and that's because they are survivors. They're surviving divorce and bereavement from the baby boomer generation, and they are faced with an awful lot of dilemmas about what they do with their children and their grandchildren. And so we're going to see more changes coming on board, and it's part of our role is to help them to navigate that.
100%. No, definitely. So I think you're completely right when we look at that, the changes that we've got. I mean, even if we look at the rates of change, in the last 24 months, if we look at how much financial services changed, let alone the last 40 years that you've been in the business, there's been a huge amount of change. And I think it's impacted how clients feel, isn't it? And ultimately leading back to that, what makes them happy? What is that fundamental thing that they need? How do you find, we talk a lot about like blended approaches and how we plan for retirement. What are your views on that, and how do you do that within your firm?
It's absolutely essential. I mean, when we look at planning, we use something called the bucket approach. It's just really simple and everyone can understand it if they've never even been through a financial planning exercise. And what we do is we divide the money that you need into 3 buckets. And the first bucket is the things, we call them the things you can't avoid. The really boring, most people have got it on direct debit, council tax, all those kind of things. So we work out what that'll be. And that rarely goes away in retirement. Most of those things will stay with you. And then in the middle bucket, we have lifestyle. That might be that you play golf, or you go to the gym, or you're like me and you have the Formula One of hobbies, which is really expensive, which is which is fusing glass. And I know that I'm probably going to have to work until I'm 99 to pay for it. But, those are the things that are really important to you in your life that you want to be able to fund.
If you speak to my husband, he'd put the golf in the first.
Well, there you go. Well, we do have lots of discussions about that. And then the third bucket is kind of your aspirations. What do you want to, the things you want to do in the future yourselves, or things you want to do for your family. And then from there, you work backwards. So the first bucket, because you can't avoid it, you really need security about that income. Now, whether that's because you've worked for someone and you're very lucky and you've got a final salary arrangement, or whether or not you look at other solutions in order to give you peace of mind so that when you go to bed at night, you know that your council tax is paid. Because how else can you, if you don't know, if you're not sure at the end of the month whether you'll have enough money to fund those things, how can you relax? And how can your advisor relax? It's a kind of, it's a team effort here.
Yeah.
So it's important to have solutions that will deal with that. And then and whether that's the golf club membership or not. And then in the middle section, you can afford then to look at other areas which might give you a regular income, but it might not be as secure as the things you've chosen to provide you with the first bucket. And it leads on from there. It's almost like Lego. It's not that, other building blocks are available, but it's about building layers of certainty and maybe return and reward, and you're swapping those around as their needs evolve, and those needs will change. People at the beginning of their retirement often spend as much as you can generate from their portfolio, and even will ask you, we were thinking about doing this. Can we afford it, or can we find some money from somewhere to do something about it? Later on, they might say, we're not spending as much as we were. We're not traveling as much, or one of us has decided they don't want to drive anymore. We've realised that we've got more income than we need. What can we do about it? So it's you adapting to them and them adapting to the advice you give them. It's honestly, it's a constant. It means that every time you see someone, it's a really great conversation. It's really interesting. I really like what I do. And you never get bored. You never ever get bored.
It's a simple analogy, isn't it? Sorry, it's the simple analogy just to bring that to customers. I'm sure everyone gets that. And once they're engaged and they understand, they're going to be more keen in moving forward with you on that journey that you said so important earlier on. Yeah, and they learn that they trust you more even, that it becomes a very dynamic, flowing situation where you talk about, they open up and they start. It's interesting because when you start off the retirement journey, you do ask questions about, well, what do you want to do? How do you picture your retirement? And sometimes people have got a million different ideas about what they want to do, and other people have absolutely no idea. And it's actually you helping them to articulate what they see their retirement, what would make them happy. And later on, they'll come back to you and say, well, actually, these things have changed. What do you think I should do? And I find sometimes 75% of our conversation is nothing to do with finances. It's about the life things that are happening. And then at the end of it, we tie it up with the finances. That they've said, well, actually, unfortunately, one of our sons separated and they're having to look at what they do on property and, all those kind of things. And you might go through some examples of things they might need to consider. And then right at the end, you might spend a bit of time, well, do you think we should do this, that, and the other in order to help those people negotiate those financial issues? But a lot of the conversation is about their life events, their life hopes. And that's what makes this such a great job.
I agree. And I think it's what I love hearing you say is how much you learn from your clients. It's actually not just you passing information to your clients and educating them. It's how they've educated you along the way and how you've taken that in as well. When we look at those life events, it's just reminded me of something I saw recently, and it was on one of those Facebook groups. It was like Edinburgh Ladies Facebook page, and someone had put on it, I'm divorcing or I'm separating from my partner. Where do I start? Like, who do I speak to first? And it was incredible the number of people that said, oh, speak to this avenue, that avenue, solicitor. Some of them even said, just go straight to your mortgage advisor, etc. And I was the only one that commented on it, saying, you need a financial advisor, that you really should, seek financial advice as one of your first port of calls, because as you said, there's a lot to navigate and think about. And if you just go straight to, let's make all these decisions, cut ties, sell property, you could actually be in a situation where you're then unhappy with what you're left with. And as you said, that kind of female-male advice gap becomes more apparent. And I just found it so intriguing that of about 35 comments, I was the only one that said, if you've got a financial advisor, they might be one of the first people you want to bring and speak to about this.
We're one of the few holistic professions.
Yeah.
No, we don't take instruction. We provide. And that means that we draw on all of those areas. And sometimes we will say that that's stepping slightly out, that's going to a very specialist, maybe legal area, and you'll need some other specialised help on that. But what we don't do is just someone comes to you and says, I need to do X, and you say, okay, this is how you do it. The first thing we do is start asking other questions and build a picture, and then say, well, look, there's lots of options, and these are things you need to negotiate, but what do you really want from it? And that is often the point at which people stop, breathe, and then start to think about what they want.
That's the value of your advice. You're testing that appropriateness based on the situation, based on the fact, you've closed your laptop, haven't you? You've had that coffee chat, if you like, found out exactly what their aims and aspirations are going to be, what their situation is, where they want to be. Like I say, some are really, really hopeful about all the things they want to do in retirement. Others don't know. Yeah. You might be prompting them along the way. You're getting close. You're benefiting from them yourself as well, in terms of it's a two-way street. You're getting benefits of those close connections you've got with your clients, but that's the value, isn't it? Of it there. You're able to say, because if someone comes in and just says, oh, I want to do this. Oh, yeah, okay, just do that. That's your transactional financial advice, isn't it? Which is not a place where your profession is nowadays, is it?
No, it isn't. And what I love about it, my background, my degree was in science. And what I love about what we do is the combination of the two, that you actually, you deal with the emotional side of things, and you deal with planning, and you deal with concepts and ideas. And at the same time, you have to crunch the numbers, and you have to make them work, and you have to know the pension regulations, and you have to know the tax rates. I love doing those, a page of calculations. It makes me feel like I'm really in control here. And then on the other hand, sometimes someone says to you, which someone did very recently, they said, you changed my life.
Wow. And
I get emotional just thinking about it, because I'd never thought someone would say that to me 40 years ago, that you changed my life.
And I think the perception of society, what society have on financial advice is that's not their perception all the time either, is it? The amount of people getting financial advice, and we've touched upon this in other episodes, is actually quite a really small percentage, isn't it? They don't realise how life-changing good financial advice can be. How do you approach that in your firm, or how do you think that could be changed?
I think it's really difficult. And that's one of the reasons, my motivation behind joining the Alliance is because as a small firm, we can only outreach to where we are. And obviously we do get, recommendations to other people and a little bit of notice because we're an all-female firm. But I see one of the roles of the Alliance is I see the Alliance as the advance guard of our profession, where they're going out there and we're in a united way, we're pointing at what we do. And I think once the public see that, and they see what we can do and the difference we can make, and we have to do that in lots of different strands. We have to do that as general education. We have to do that as being role models about what we do. And what I feel very passionate about and very glad to be part of it is the feeling of teamwork that I've got from being part of that. That it isn't one just section of personal finance. It's all of them. It's qualifications providers. It's the profession itself, it's the providers, and it's the regulator. And I think attending the first conference was one of those moments where you thought, we're doing it again. It's like an RDR moment where we're literally on the tip of another evolutionary moment. And this next one is going to be the legacy I see moving forward of us being on a par with medicine and law and all those, because people really see that we're a fundamental building block of society. And once that is acknowledged on a wider base, then I think that's where we open up, and that's when we become diverse, and that's when we become all things to all people, as you would in those other professions. Nobody ever says, I can't see a lawyer because I'm a woman. And I want, before I finish working in this profession, that someone says, I can't get financial advice because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
And there's an all-female firm as well. with the Consumer Duty Alliance, that as a platform for you.
Yeah.
You've obviously got, I presume you have new people coming into the firm and all that type of thing. What a wonderful thing to be able to say that you change someone's life. And I presume you use that as an example, but more importantly, how do you attract ladies into the industry with the all-female firm that you have?
I think it's a multi-pronged approach. I think people actually don't realise what we do, and so I think a lot of it is that's almost the modelling part of it, where you start talking about what you do. And I think things like this podcast, although it will be talking a lot to the profession, it's hopefully something that other people will see and be showcased in other ways, so that people start to realise. And it is changing. I mean, from when I started, it's changed quite significantly, but it just needs more of it. And we also need to talk to careers organisations and schools and things like that. I mean, a lot of advisors do that on an individual basis anyway. There's lots of pro bono programs going into schools. And I think when you see more women advisors doing that, then that will help. But there's other avenues. And I think the Alliance is something that will help, particularly small firms. You know, often you're doing your day job, you're giving advice, and then also if you are a small firm, you're generally running the firm as well, or 2 or 3 of you are running the firms. So you've got all those extra requirements and regulatory things that you have to do, and therefore finding a bit of time to develop a program to get what you think is important and you feel passionate about financial is impossible. But if we can leapfrog with organisations like the Alliance, and that if the providers see the value, as you know, as the regulator now does, you know, saying we recognise that 80% of financial advice is good and given through small firms, that means that you are going to catch those coattails and be showcased, and that's what we need.
100%, and that's what we're massively behind, is championing that financial advice and how we get more clients trusting the profession, wanting to use the profession, and actually recognising they have a need to use the profession as well. And what we definitely found in our most recent research is that, as we said, those who took advice were actually happier in retirement because their outcomes were right. And what a great way to showcase to the rest of the world why they should absolutely be looking at it.
We empower them to forget about the money and get on with their retirement. That's what we do.
Oh, I love that.
That's what it's about.
Love that. Thank you so much, Vanessa. That has been brilliant to speak to you. You've given such good insights. And I think what I've definitely seen here and in your role in your firm and the Consumer Duty Alliance, it's all about the customer, isn't it? It's all about them at the end of the day and actually working with them. We always ask guests at the end if they had one piece of advice for others listening to this. What would yours be? I'm putting you on the spot now.
I think trust yourself and trust your instinct with people, and just realise you're in it for the long term. So that if you think the right thing to do is to tell someone to do nothing or to do very little, then do that too, because they'll thank you and they'll come back to you. And that's happened to me so many times that sometimes I've said to someone, you're not ready for something like this now. Go away, work another few years, come back, and that's when we can really give you some advice, that kind of thing. So just trust yourself. That's
really powerful, yes. So actually the art of doing nothing is actually sometimes harder than looking for something to do, isn't it? So
it's looking busy. Don't always look busy.
Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. That's been brilliant.
My pleasure.
Amazing. Thanks, Vanessa.
Cheers.